Yeah, let's talk about sewer connection.
Welcome to the Behind the Mules podcast, presented by Cafe Mule Coffee. I'm incredibly excited to bring you this next individual who is the epitome of the duck swimming upstream. Constantly looking calm and collected above water, while underwater paddling furiously. And I know that they're paddling furiously day in and day out because over the past decade, they have built what has become an iconic craft brewery in Boise, Idaho. And they've done this starting out with almost nothing and getting to a stage where they're repeatedly winning awards with their beers and still maintaining an atmosphere that feels incredibly friendly and approachable. They've achieved this success by and large by getting the buy-in, both figuratively and literally, from our local community in a manner that almost no one else has. I do promise that at some point, we will also talk about sewer connection, but without further ado, let's get into it. I'm here with Collin Rudeen from Boise Brewing, and I'm going to start this interview out. I would like you to characterize for me what you've built here with Boise Brewing, and definitely include in that what makes you the most proud about this business.
Yeah, so we've been around a little over 10 years. Probably one of the defining characteristics about us is that we're a community-owned brewery. We're up to about 800 owners at the moment. Started out with just beer, just a tap room, and distribution to restaurants, and well, I guess just restaurants and bars at first with kegs. Then we expanded into bottles and then cans, and then somewhat recently we leased the building next to us and added a restaurant onto our operations.
How did you fund yourself? How have you been able to have community buy-in in this way in a financial sense?
We used a pretty unused method for getting started. Two different methods, actually. They're pretty similar from the outside, but they allow, typically you cannot advertise an equity offering to the public. You can't put on Facebook, hey, you want to buy into my brewery? It's highly illegal.
When Collin's talking about an equity offering here, what he's really talking about is selling stock. And according to federal regulations, most small businesses cannot advertise and openly sell stock to the general public. I can't simply just walk out onto the sidewalk as a small business owner and say, hey, if you give me $100, I'll give you 1% in my company. That's highly illegal. And where federal regulations do allow small businesses to advertise and sell stock, they're usually limited to selling that stock to people who have over $1 million in net worth, excluding their house, which means their house doesn't count at all into that calculation, or these people make more than $250,000 in income a year. These individuals are termed accredited investors. And while these federal regulations are really important and valuable, they're intended to protect poor little old widows from hucksters and traveling snake oil salesmen. The flip side of that coin is that they really limit small business owners unless they have a great network of millionaires, and not every small business owner has that network to rely on. The other part of this is that even where these small businesses can take on investment from accredited investors, often the accounting and reporting that is required to meet those federal regulations is incredibly costly to keep up with, and simply isn't something that most small business owners can afford and sustain. And so that is why it's so important that Collin was able to successfully take advantage of some state programs.
With registration with the State Department of Finance, you kind of submit your business plan and talk about risk factors, financials, all those sorts of things. And they don't give their blessing as far as it's a good investment or not, but they just look for accuracy. And then once you achieve this registration with the state, then you can advertise. And then typically with like an LLC structure too, you're limited to 34 individuals. So if you need $1 million, they've each got to put in a pretty good chunk of change. But this way, we don't have a limit on the number of investors. So we went the route of $1,000 was what it took to get in. And people do get an equity slice of the pie, but I tried to, with 800 owners, I don't want a bunch of people bounding down my door wondering where their return is. So I try to downplay their return as much as I can. And most people are here because they wanted to be part of something. You get a mug. We did a dinner the other night that was just for owners, wasn't available to the public. So there's other fun stuff that's the part of the membership that people are into.
Would you have been able to start this brewery at the beginning without that funding?
Maybe. That's kind of going into one of the first challenges that we were going to talk about, I think, is getting started in the first place. I didn't have any money myself, not really, so would have needed to have a big partner without this ownership structure to take a big piece of the equity. And that could be, finding a partner can be a fraught thing. It could go great and they could be a good asset and help the business, or it could be something that doesn't work and you've got some issues to work through. So we maybe could have gotten started in another way, but it kind of just would have depended on me being able to find a wealthy investor to help get started.
Have you had any challenges with owners that you're willing to share?
Yeah, we do have some challenges for sure. With that many people, it's inevitable. Let's see. Some of we have kicked out a couple of owners. Some of them just temporarily. Some had to have a conversation about, hey, you can't talk to our bartenders that way. It's like, you can't do that, man. That's not okay. So we have some troubles like that. There's, we've never really gotten ahead financially. It's always been like just in the trenches, just surviving. And I'm pretty humbled, I guess, that we haven't had a bunch of owners that have been pounding down my door. A handful. There's one or two that have been a little irritated about it. And that's understandable. Mostly people that kind of don't understand what's going on or what we're doing, it seems like. And once we talk to them, they kind of say, okay, I see what you're doing. I see where you're going. For the most part, they've been pretty good. I mean, we're talking about like 5 problems over 10 years from 800 people. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, your percentage there, it's low. Has there been one or maybe more challenges at Boise Brewing that you thought were actually going to tank the brewery, that you wouldn't survive?
Well, COVID's an obvious one. So in retrospect, everything seems so different than in the moment, of course. But I think in February, maybe March, I think it was a thing. Like it was in the news, and it was kind of this weird, sort of out there, but not that relevant. And then I remember the NBA canceled their season, which to me was like, what? That's crazy. That's out of the blue. And that was the moment that it was like, uh-oh, I think this might be trouble. And in a way, like throughout the pandemic, the federal aid was enough ahead of our heavy losses that we were okay. There was never a moment that we were going to be short on payroll or anything like that. But we never knew what was coming. We never knew how much assistance was going to be there. So it was just kind of like, well, we'll do our best, I guess, and we'll see what happens. There's some comfort in the fact that it wouldn't have been our fault. It's like nobody was going to survive if we didn't get the PPP or some of the other federal assistance. I mean, it's maybe wouldn't have felt as bad if we failed alongside everybody else, but that was probably the time that was the scariest.
No, those are hard, scary times, and I was happy at that moment that we didn't have a massive retail component to what we do. You know, that saved us, and I can't imagine having a large base of my business be a retail front. Was there another time outside of COVID that you thought that potentially the business was going to be at risk?
I can't think of a specific one-time thing. I think when you're sort of on the edge cash-wise, it could be anything. You know, like we've had moments where our chiller went out. That cools the beer, keeps it at temperature. It's essential for making our product. And we didn't really have the money to get a new one. And if you don't have that, you don't have beer and you don't have income. And we were able to finance it in some way. I don't remember how, but some equipment loan or something like that. But there's moments like that of a problem that's not, I mean, it was a $20,000 problem or something like that, but that was enough that it was like, oh, I don't know how this looks for payroll next week. So there's been a few moments like that.
So talking about that grind that we both know, and before we started recording, I was sharing a story with you, just very relevant this morning. You know, I skipped my workout, skipped my breakfast, plugged right in because I woke up with stress in the middle of the night last night that I had to respond to a grocery buyer, and it's this whole deal. And, you know, we know that. We've experienced it, and I know that certainly things aren't the same as I necessarily would have envisioned them. And so I would be very curious if you could take yourself back 11 years, let's say. What did you think owning and running a brewery would look like? And then how has that played out? And now what do you think owning and running a brewery entails? What's the delta there? What's different?
Oh, yeah. So before getting started, I put my spreadsheets together and doing the financials and like, this is easy. We're going to make a lot of money. No problem. Right away. And that was wildly, wildly off the mark. It's just, you know, barely scraping by every single year. And we're starting, I think, to get to where we need to be to start to get ahead a little bit. Still not there yet. But I think that's the biggest thing is the naivety of how this was going to play out and how it actually has.
We're the same. I mean, year over year with our coffee business, we're just chasing profitability, and we're always right there on the bubble. It's like, okay, you know, if something goes one way or another in the last month of the year, we may be there. If not, we're not. Yeah, that never feels good. And it's like at the same time we have, you know, growth opportunities, and we take those, and those take investment, and that was the profit that we thought was gonna be putting us over the next year, but now it's just money that's become an expense into some opportunity, and we're chasing that. But I think have to do that. You know, I asked a little bit about what your own perception was of having a brewery, running a brewery beforehand and then now, and talking about the financial side of it, and the picture being like it always looks great on the spreadsheet. You know, it's like any map. It's like the map looks so flat until you get there and it's super uphill. But breweries in general, right? I mean, they have a lot of cachet as a cool, like sexy place, and especially Boise Brewing. Like you really have done a great job of building in the community aspect. This podcast, to some degree, though, is about people who are pursuing the American dream, which I believe you very much are, in small businesses. And, you know, it's called Behind the Mules because there's often a lot of plowing that goes on, right? And plowing's like you're stuck behind a mule, you're walking in, muddy soil. You know, sometimes things are coming out the backside of the mule that aren't all that pleasant, but you got to keep your head down and you just got to keep going at it. You know, it might be hot, sweaty, mosquitoes after you, whatever, right? The analogy there, but there's a lot of plodding that goes into the day-to-day. So on one hand, you have what a brewery looks like to people on the outside. And then I'm kind of curious, is there one or more elements to this business that are the true plodding and the plowing that people don't see that would be valuable for them to just understand that goes into it?
Yeah, let's talk about sewer connection. That's, I mean, talking about the stuff coming out of the back end, that's it's people assume that it's like sexy and I'm having a beer at 8 a.m. and it's a party all day long. But this is an issue that came up this summer, actually, is the city realized that they didn't charge breweries appropriate connection fees when we opened up. There was a period of time of about 3 years or something when we opened that they were not charging fees correctly. And any business or house or whatever is charged a fee for connecting to the sewer. That's so that the sewer plant, the processing facility, is big enough to handle all of the buildings and businesses and homes sending sewer to the facility. So it's standard. It makes sense. But for us, they charged us. So part of their calculation for a restaurant is, okay, how many toilets do you have? How many sinks? How many mop sinks? And then they'll do a calculation for what your connection fee should be. And they did that for us as a tap room, but they didn't include any of the brewing side of things. And of course, a brewery uses a massive amount of water compared to a restaurant, say. So they undercharged us a lot. And the same thing happened for quite a few other breweries in the city. So this summer, they came and said, hey, sorry, we made a mistake. We need to recoup those fees for $70,000. Bigger numbers for bigger breweries.
That's right. He said 70, as in $70,000. And this is somewhat of a reoccurring theme that I feel like I face in small business and as a part of this podcast that I try to highlight, is that disconnect between people who are making something and trying to make that a profitable endeavor, and those people who are really so far disconnected from what it actually takes to make a dollar that they think that they can drop a $70,000 bill on a small business and that they're going to be able to pay up. There's just a massive disconnect there.
And of course, Public Works they're just doing their calculation and that's what comes out and they communicate it. But it came at a time when the craft beer industry nationwide is struggling, and all of us in the city got these huge fees that they wanted to collect. And fortunately, I feel like I've got a pretty good relationship with the mayor's office and their business liaison there. So rather than fighting further with the Public Works, just go into the mayor's office and say, hey, you're going to put out of business half the breweries in the state or in the city if you follow through with this. And so all this conversation took a month or maybe a little more to play out. I was very fortunate to have that good relationship with the city and have that higher level conversation. And they went to bat for us. You know, there's things that they have legal restrictions. They can't curry favor to businesses. But they were able to work with their lawyers and work out a situation where they said, okay, your fees are considered paid for where you're at today. It was our mistake that we didn't charge you correctly at the time. So consider them paid for whatever your production is in 2023 was their benchmark. And if you'd make more beer the next year, then you'll have to pay those connection fees that you'll have. So it felt like we had a pretty equitable solution that wasn't trying to curry favor to a specific industry, but also was a fair solution to us as breweries. And but we didn't know what the answer was going to be. So there's a month of that hanging over our heads of, are they going to shut down half of the breweries in the city? We'll find out.
Again, remember that Collin is an incredibly composed individual. But for the entire time that this issue was working out, the stress level of the normal business owner who had been in business for 8 years, who had 800 investors involved, all of whose money he could potentially mostly lose over a surprise bill, that stress is high. Juxtapose that with the stress that's being felt by the people at the city who are the actual decision makers. I would imagine that many of those individuals didn't really lose a ton of sleep over this during that month.
But that's the not sexy plotting part of the business. There's random stuff like that comes up.
No, I love that. Thank you. You know, I I did a lot of our first podcast on just kind of my battles with different bureaucrats and government entities. And I see the purpose and I have good relationships with people. I mean, we just donated a bunch of money to the city yesterday for trails in partnership with the Boise Co-op. And, I love the functions of all the people there. And you skipped ahead on the question I was going to ask was, how did you deal with that? And I think it's really beautiful that you worked it through a relationship with people, because I think that when you can connect on a personal level and get them to actually understand the situation, I think things usually work out pretty well. Then the bureaucracy can work for you and work as it should. And that's awesome. And I also love that, your unseen thing was about sewage. So we both employ people. And, for me, I think, we've made significant decisions in how we execute our business based around how we want to employ people, like the types of people we want to employ, the duration we would ideally want to employ them. But you have a very multifaceted business. If you're willing to share, I would be interested in hearing maybe some of your better, worst employee stories. Has there been any absolutely just surprising, I can't believe that person did that employee stories?
We're fortunate to not have a ton of large stories like that. Of course, we have many small things. One thing that comes to mind is we had a delivery driver that we found out was stopping at Payette and having a few beers while he was delivering beers. Like, no, man. No, you cannot be drinking and driving working for a brewery.
And drinking the competitor's beer, even though everyone seems to get along pretty well in the brewery scene here. But, that's like a double strike.
I think maybe some of the harder ones are when the employee doesn't really fit in and doesn't know it. That's the harder thing, is they think that they're doing everything and try to have conversations about, here, this is who we are, this is how we do things, this is how we get along as a team, and they're just not getting it. And no matter how many conversations you have, they think they're doing it and they're not. And then it's the worst thing when you let them go and they're surprised. It's like, well, we talked about this again and again, and you're just not fitting what we're looking for. So that's hard when it's a surprise. That's hard. Going back to problem employees. So we launched our restaurant not too long ago and had to hire, 25, 30 people in short order. And this is kind of coming out of COVID too, so everything's weird as far as unemployment and people who got unemployment. But we'd get, for whatever reason, cooks in particular, back of house. Maybe 1 out of 5 that applied and set up an interview time would show up for the interview, which was really hard when we were understaffed and our head chefs are taking time out for these interviews that don't show up. It's just shocking that you'd apply and not show up. I mean, I get it here and there, but 1 out of 5 is what we were getting for a little while. And we get resumes that were like, chock full of spelling errors and grammar problems. Looked like they, typed up a paragraph on a Word document, printed it out and sent it in. It's like, if you have no spelling errors in your resume and you show up, you're hired. That's where we were at. And it was just shocking to, I don't know, what is going on? I don't understand.
Do you have a theory at all for the no-shows? Because that's weird. That's super weird.
I think I'm just a grumpy old man, and you should show up for your interviews if you set one up. To a degree, it might be people that came of age during COVID when you got this cushy unemployment situation. But that still doesn't make sense to me, because that's not the case anymore, and people probably need to pay rent. So what in the world's going on? It just baffles me. But I don't know. There's a certain age group that has been a challenge, I feel like.
I know that your spouse is now working some in the business, which he previously did not do. I'm curious if you're willing to share what brought that about, but also on a bigger level, over a decade, how has this business had an impact on you and your family as you've grown it and had kids? Certainly, if you would ask my wife, her viewpoint of who I am as a person in the business is she's very proud of what we've done and built, but it's added some friction at home, not in a devastating way, but in a there's had to be adjustments for everyone.
Yeah, I feel a little similar as far as bringing some friction home, and again, not in a devastating way like you said, but it comes home. That stress comes home, or the getting calls late at night about trip breaker or something that I got to leave and figure out. It's not that big of a deal, but it's there all the time. Like you said, the door doesn't shut and you're home. And it's having kids, it has been helpful in creating a little bit better work-life balance. That's been a good thing, but still that stress comes home sometimes, and I worry a little bit about being a father and a business owner at the same time, because there are things for sure that I maybe would have had him in ski lessons before now, for example, but my attention's elsewhere when it should be at home thinking about the kids. There's somewhat of a positive side of that with the boys coming to the restaurant, and it feels like home for, or the living room for them. Hopefully they don't run around too much and annoy other people, but they like coming here, so that's a positive in that sense. I'm not sure that the distractions from some of the fatherly duties outweigh the fun of coming here, but yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
I've felt the same. I mean, there's certain things that I would love to support on the kid side, and I am involved in some things, but there's some things that I absolutely can't support that. I'm working a little bit later than most people, or have things that I have to do on the weekend when other people wouldn't. And also I've tried to weigh it out as well, where my kids, 2 of the 3 of them have come and done work for us, so they're kind of the summer cleanup person, and it gives them an opportunity to make a little extra money from me and be involved in the business. And I really like seeing them interact with our employees, who I think, I assume they enjoy them there. I don't know. I tell my my ops manager when my kids are in, it's like, okay, well, you treat them just like you treat everyone else. Similarly, I tell my kids, if Chad tells you to do something, then Chad's the boss. And I like being able to have that outlet to work them into that and kind of get that experience. But does it outweigh it in the end? They'll have to tell me when they're 30 and have a little bit different life experience and can reflect on it. Regarding your spouse working here now, do you enjoy working in the same business together?
Yeah, that's been kind of wild. It's a helpful thing, I think, because she came into an HR role and helping with the front of house, and we needed somebody that would come in and be respected right away. We kind of talked about needing an assistant manager and the challenges of hiring from within and having suddenly the person that you were working beside before telling you what to do. That could be a pretty big challenge. So to have somebody that's very invested in the business as much as you can be, and taking on that role of responsibility and to be able to be respected day one has been pretty helpful. And so for me, like I try not to check my email on the weekends to the degree that I can, or like we talked about, it doesn't stop, but I try to at least switch gears as much as I can. Rachel, my wife, being new to this, she would, she's trying to learn everything. There's a whole bunch to learn, drinking from the fire hose. So she comes home and she wants to talk about, especially like HR stuff. That's for me stressful. I'm an engineer, right? So talking personnel kind of issues is stressful. So she, with casual conversation that used to be about basketball practice is now like, what do we do about this problem employee? And we had to be like, nope, not talking about this right now. Let's set up a meeting tomorrow off-site at 2:00. Put it in the calendar. We can talk about this then. So that's been a challenge.
I love that you shared that, and it actually kind of helped me distill down, the 2 biggest issues that my spouse would likely say that me owning a business raises in the home are, 1, I feel a pull to touch base with my email and be ahead of any issues that come up all the time, and way more than I should. And it's actually cathartic for me when I go on like a fall hunting trip and I'm in the mountains and I can just tell all our people, do not try to contact me because it's impossible. And it feels great. I love that and I embrace it. But when I'm home, it doesn't matter what we're doing. Sadly, we eat dinner as a family every night together, but sadly in the back of my mind, I'm always like, oh man, I wonder if, this issue is going to arise that I'm going to, get notified via email and check in with. And I've tried different strategies to reduce that, but that would certainly be my spouse's number one, I think, is just that draw that I have to be informed and be able to take action at any point. And then number two, or maybe she would flip the importance, would be that I definitely wore her out for years just wanting to talk about my business problems. And my wife's an oncology PA and she has a stressful job and she deals with people dying and she deals with all this stuff. It's like heavy, important stuff. And in relation, I always see that that's more important. But in my world, when things are burning down, it's like I can't get away from it. And think, maybe unfairly, I've always seen her stuff as like, well, yeah, but you get to come home from the clinic at the end of the day and someone else takes that burden and you get your space off, where I feel always under the gun and then always want to talk about that, which she has not necessarily appreciated. That took some adjustment. Probably she made a lot of allowances, and I've tried to reduce the amount that I overwhelm her with my business challenges and things I'm trying to strategize around. Social media is something I have a complex relationship with. What is the value of social media to you and how do you use it? What's your strategy?
Yeah, I'm a little similar to you, as I'm not a big social media guy myself, but it's essential for our business. When we've got an event coming up, it's how we get the word out so people know. It's really important. And I guess this is a different conversation. I think social media in general is kind of has a negative effect on society. So it's a little weird to have to depend so much on social media for letting people know what we're doing. And at the same time, in my head, like, I just hate this. I hate everything about social media. And maybe that's back to me being the grumpy old man again. But it's we pay a lot of attention to our posts and how they do and when we post and all that sort of thing. And I get on Facebook to like our posts and then I'm done. So it's complex for me too, I suppose.
We've for sure benefited in a huge way from social media at Cafe Muley. And top of mind and most recently was last summer when we knew that Richard was going to pass away. Our community banded together and bought us a brand new mule. I still get emotional thinking about that. And that effort was powered in large part by social media. It was amazing. And at the same time, I constantly feel trapped. 20, 30 years ago, a small local business could actually purchase advertising spots in local media because people were tuning in to the same local television and local radio. But those levers just really aren't available anymore to us. The consumption of media is so diversified that it's just not going to get seen by enough people for us to buy those spots. So small businesses don't have any other option than to participate in the likes of Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc. And I think the rub for me is knowing that as a small business, we are producing and providing entertainment for free to these platforms so that they can turn around and capture eyeballs and make further advertising dollars. And that's rough in part because the social media platforms always change their algorithm. So a small business may be successful with one strategy for a while and they're able to actually reach potential customers and get that traction. But then the social media platform changes their algorithm, and the local business has to figure out all over again how to produce something different so that that social media network will actually put out those advertisements or those posts to the type of customers that would want to see them. So that's rough because it comes at a real cost, whether the business is doing it themselves in-house like we do at Cafe Mule, whether they're trying to hire someone outside of the business to produce that social media for them. We started using social media in the early days, in the very beginning, simply to advertise our trail services. We wanted to leverage this platform to announce a date and a time to bring people together in the outdoors so they could enjoy face-to-face relationships. And I think we're really trying to figure out how to double down on this philosophy of only using it in a way that adds true value to people. And that can include, in our mind, some lighthearted and feel-good entertainment, but should include education that benefits people, whether it's how to make coffee better, how to manage yourself around, equine stock better, or whether it's skills that help you enjoy the outdoors more. And then we really love the idea of doubling down on our philosophy of getting people outside and enjoying real relationships that they're enriching with one another. And we have some programs that I'm super excited about that are coming up, and I can't wait to announce those in the coming weeks. So stay tuned with our social media, with Instagram and Facebook, and how we reach out and tell people about those. Collin, that took me to most of the questions that I had planned. I'm curious, do you have any stories you want to tell? Or are there unique things that, fun things about Boise Brewing, things you want to share?
One other kind of fun story. A lot of what we are about is connections, I think, to other aspects of the community. And early on, that could be kind of intimidating because, I was just a kid who had never run a business, never worked at a brewery. I just still felt like a kid that was faking it till I made it. Like, just hoping people didn't laugh when I say I wanted to start a brewery. That was a win, I felt like. So anyway, a couple years in, there was a pretty well-known social media entity and a good local business that we were trying. I, at first, just kind of wanted to visit this guy and see what he was all about. It's kind of a cool thing. But this guy's, he was doing this kind of cool thing where he would, he had this mule and he would bring coffee out into the foot. I don't know if you know about this guy.
I'm familiar, I think. I think I've heard of him, maybe. Yeah.
In my mind, he was this big deal. This big social media following. And it was intimidating to just go up there while he's serving coffee and being like, hey, do you want to do something together? I'm not quite sure what, but maybe there's a coffee and beer collaboration that we could work on here. And of course, as you well know, ended up making a coffee beer together, having Richard the mule down here. I think a really rainy February day, looked miserable outside of the front gates here. Actually, that beer is coming out again pretty soon here. But being able to have those connections to local community partners like yourself, pretty valuable. And it's a fun thing to be able to, I guess maybe that's one of the biggest things about small business is being able to make those connections that are outside of just sales, fostering a bigger sense of community. I'm hugely appreciative to Collin Rudeen and the rest of the Boise Brewing crew for letting me have some of his time. If you're in Boise, Idaho, please stop into their tap room in downtown, check it out, say hi to Collin and his wife and the rest of the crew. I would like to thank all of you for listening to the Behind the Mules podcast. Whether you're a small business owner who's looking to commiserate with others,
or whether you're someone who is just interested and would like a deeper understanding of small business and would hope to support small businesses and how you purchase, thank you. You can help us by leaving a review and subscribing on the podcast platform where you're currently listening. And you can always benefit us by purchasing coffee at cafemule.com. That's CAFEMULE.com. Thank you again so much and have a great day.